Great. Well, I'm Terry Lohman. I'm the co-chair for UU's for a Just Economic Community. And tonight we're having a presentation on nuclear armaments. And I thought maybe I should frame this because you might wonder why economic justice is tied in. And there are two very good reasons. First of all, the nuclear armaments are sucking our budget dry, so we don't have room to do the things or the money to do the things that we would like done to get economic justice. The other reason is that if we ever set off a nuclear bomb, we're going to have lots of economic issues along with just surviving. It will cause chaos. So with that, I want to introduce Tom Rogers, who is a physicist who was in the Navy. And do I have that correct?
I was an engineer and I was also a physicist, yes.
Right. Well, I'm doing it from memory. I read it a few weeks ago. So at any rate, from there, we'll have Tom take it away. And thank you, Tom, for showing up for us.
Well, thank you. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. When I heard that you were based, or at least Terry is based in South Florida, I did look at the map and discovered that I am about as far from South Florida as one can be and still be in the lower 48. I noticed Dave is from San Diego, Veterans for Peace. I don't know if we met Dave, but I was a crew on, actually first mate on the Golden Rule in 2019, and we when we embarked for Hawaii and sailed to Hawaii, and San Diego VFP really supported us as we were preparing Golden Rule for that voyage. This presentation is a phased approach to nuclear weapons abolition. It's something that's my work. I am open to criticism of any kind to help improve it. The presentation itself will run about 25 minutes, and then I'm open to Q&A or discussion for as long as you guys can stand to stay up. Terry sent out a handout that goes with the presentation. There's a lot of numbers and concepts that are discussed, and having a handout in front of you really makes it easier to digest. So if you have that, that would be helpful. If you don't, then you don't. So if everyone can see me and hear me, I'm getting nods. Good, thank you. I'm going to share screen and move over into a PowerPoint presentation. So I will not be able to see most of you for the rest of the next 25 minutes or so. So see you on the other side, eh? All right, I think I'm good. Terry said I was good. Am I good?
Yep.
All right, terrific. So, who is that steely-eyed killer of the deep? just a little about me. Yes, I am that same guy. I quit college and got drafted in 1966. I enlisted in the Navy to avoid going with my Army buddies to Vietnam. I had a little college and was, I was a hippie, and I got in the Navy and I just fit. I don't know why, but I qualified as a reactor operator in the Navy's nuclear propulsion program. And then I competed for an officer program. They sent me back to college, finished up an engineering degree, and I was commissioned in 1973 and spent the rest of my career as a submarine officer. I finally retired in 1998 after a 32-year career, and I never, ever, ever, as I was going along, believed that I would ever make that my final career, but that's what it turned out to be. When I was in command of a nuclear-powered attack submarine, I was directly responsible for nuclear weapons. I have knowledge and training in nuclear physics and nuclear engineering, and I understand the terrible, terrible destructive power of nuclear weapons. So if I, understanding what I understand, fail to oppose a national security strategy that's based on nuclear annihilation, then I'm complicit in that strategy. So I've spent the last 20 years working for the abolition of nuclear weapons with Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action. This is our house in Poulsbo, Washington. We are on 3.8 acres of land adjacent to the Bangor Trident Submarine Base. The house is 1.4 miles from the largest concentration of deployed nuclear weapons in the Western Hemisphere. That house was built by volunteers. I was one of them. Mona remembers, about 11, 12 years ago. And we built it on the site of the previous house that was a crappy old Rambler that burned down, and we got a little seed money from insurance and a lot of donations, and this is our home now, and Ground Zero's home, not my home, but it's where we do most of our thinking and organizing. So Ground Zero has opposed nuclear weapons, especially the Trident weapon system, since the 70s. But simply opposing nuclear weapons and our national security strategy is not enough. We need to articulate a path or a plan for the total elimination of nuclear weapons. And this plan uses existing treaties, cooperative negotiation, and verification to achieve complete nuclear weapons elimination. I recognize that your focus as an organization is economic justice. And as Terry said during the intro, nuclear weapons are a money sink. Taxpayers pay for nuclear weapons, and all that money right now, the modernization is they're talking about $1.7 trillion of nuclear modernization is on the backs of the people who pay taxes and not the corporations that are getting the bulk of that money. That's not what this presentation is about, but I'm happy to talk about it during the Q&A and discussion. So this phase process is simple, and I'll break it down for you. So we'll begin with an inventory of nuclear weapons, nuclear warheads in the world today. These numbers come from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists Nuclear Notebook. It's available online. If you got the handout, there's a link in the handout to the nuclear notebook. And these numbers are updated annually. The US numbers just came out for 23, so it's current. You see there are over 12,500 warheads in the world today, and the US and Russia account for over 90% of them. The first column, deployed warheads, are warheads that are essentially ready to launch right now, every day. They are warheads that are mated to ballistic missiles, or they're stored close to dedicated bomber aircraft. For the US, that number, 1,670, includes 970 that are loaded right now in Trident ballistic missile submarines that are either in Kings Bay, Georgia, or Bangor, Washington, or are deployed from those bases on patrol. 400 of those weapons are in ICBM silos in the upper Midwest, North Dakota, Montana, South Dakota, Colorado. I think that's all of them. And then there are 300 deployed warheads at two bomber bases in the U.S., Minot and Whiteman, where the B-2 and B-52 bombers that are dedicated nuclear platforms are based. In 1986, there were over 70,000 warheads in the world. And obviously that number has really come down a lot. It's come down, 60,000 warheads have gone away. But since 2010, the numbers haven't changed much. So it's time to renew efforts to dismantle warheads and to get our government to do so. So phase one. Since 90% of the warheads are controlled by the US and Russia, we need to reduce those stockpiles before we can expect any of the other 7 nuclear-armed states to reduce theirs. The vast majority of nuclear warheads in both the US and Russia's stockpiles are not deployed. That means they're stored separate from launchers in bunkers and are not available for use on short notice. And it also includes about 3,000 obsolete but intact warheads that are in storage, waiting dismantling, but have been waiting years to be dismantled. So you can see that between the US and Russia, there's over 8,000 non-deployed warheads. And since national security strategies depend on strategic deterrence using deployed warheads, then you can dismantle non-deployed warheads with no effect on readiness. And this is the way you sell it to Congress. The way you sell it to the military is, okay, you've got your deployed warheads, we can afford to dismantle non-deployed warheads, and it's something we need to do. So of those, breaking down the non-deployed warheads, The US and Russia each have over 1,500 obsolete retired warheads. The US warheads are all stored under Department of Energy control in bunkers at Kirtland Air Force Base outside Albuquerque. And they are waiting to be moved to the Pantex plant in Texas, where they would be dismantled, except there's no priority or funding for that to happen right now. Now, retired warheads can be dismantled unilaterally or bilaterally, in an agreement with Russia, would dramatically reduce stockpiles with no change in the government's national security strategy. In the 90s, the U.S. dismantled an average of 1,000 warheads a year. But in 2019, they dismantled 73. In 2020, they dismantled 184. And the Biden administration has failed to disclose, refused to disclose the numbers for 21 and 22. Contrary to what they said they would do. They said they would be transparent, and they're not. Russia has, you see, has a comparable number, and could do the same, dismantle those warheads. This has no effect on capability, but it does demonstrate intent to reduce stockpile. Now, the next two columns are harder. The U.S. has twice as many reserve strategic weapons as Russia. Russia has a lot more tactical weapons, simply because as the American history, we still have two oceans, so we don't need tactical nuclear weapons because the real distinction between tactical and strategic weapons is range. We don't have any enemies near our coast, so we can proxy and use NATO, but and that's what that 200 weapons is. But Russia has a lot more tactical nuclear weapons that could be used against Europe as part of the Ukraine war, or against China, but against their neighbors. So dismantling those two categories of weapons is going to require effective bilateral negotiation and cooperation with Russia. How are we going to do that? We need to renegotiate the New START with Russia to achieve a minimum deterrent. There's a war going on in Ukraine, and that has really complicated any bilateral negotiations with Russia. But it is vital that they move forward, and part of what we need to do is to call on the State Department, Biden's State Department, to do this now and not pass it on to the next administration. We had a retired CIA analyst at Ground Zero last week, Ray McGovern, who is a Russian CIA analyst. And I asked him, who are the arms control negotiators? Are they a separate cadre? Are they political? And the answer is they are not political. They are professional arms control negotiators. They're old. A lot of that going around. They clearly must work for the administration that's in power, but they do have the continuity and the experience and knowledge to negotiate skillfully. And they been basically out of jobs for the last 4 years during the Trump administration. Anyway, this renegotiation should be a new treaty that provides for a transition to a lower level of deployed weapons and gets rid of most of the non-deployed weapons. That's the only way that we're going to get the other 7 nuclear armed states to enter into multilateral negotiations, is to level the playing field by reducing the holdings of both Russia and the US. So the next version of START has to apply to non-deployed weapons, and it also has to reduce the number of deployed warheads and their launchers to the minimum deterrence. And I'll explain what that is in a couple of slides. New START's been around since 2010. The key word in the acronym Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty is reduction. And it did reduce the number of deployed warheads to 1550. And boy, at the time in 2010, all those starry-eyed young activists said, hey, just a stepping stone to further reductions. But of course, that's not what happened. And I don't think it was ever intended to happen. That number 1550 right now is the number that is intended to last forever by the administration, by the military, by the arms control industry, by the arms industry. We need to break that paradigm. That treaty came perilously close to expiring in 2021. The original treaty was a 5-year treaty, a 10-year treaty that was signed in 2010. It was actually scheduled to expire February 5th, 2021. That was 2 weeks after Inauguration Day. The Trump administration opposed extending the existing treaty and failed to negotiate a new treaty. They were happy to let it expire. And I really commend the Biden administration and the Russian government for managing to extend the treaty only 2 days before it expired. So now it's enforced to 2026. Another, well, we got 4 more years on it. Only 3 now. God, where does time go? So that's why it's important to get going on the renegotiation. But extending that treaty was a big deal, and nobody heard about it. But it was a big deal because New START has what the folks call the gold standard of verifications. Without New START, if the treaty had been allowed to expire, intrusive on-site inspections, open skies agreements, and extensive notifications between the 2 countries would have stopped. And those verification protocols have raised confidence on both sides. It provides a reciprocal window into what's going on with the deployed weapons. Without New START, there's no limit on the number of deployed nuclear weapons. And in a few minutes, I'll talk about what would have happened if that treaty had been allowed to expire. Regretfully, the on-site inspections, each side is authorized 18 on-site inspections per year, and they are real, and they're intrusive. And all of my people that I know who handle nuclear weapons at Bangor say they are really intrusive. And so they work. Problem. The on-site inspections were paused during COVID. And the negotiations to resume on-site inspections have broken down because of the war in Ukraine. So it's imperative that that important part of the treaty gets back on track. Minimum deterrence, an application of deterrence theory in which a state possesses no more nuclear weapons than is necessary to deter an adversary from attacking. The number here is not that important. It's about the concept. I came up with 500 as a reasonable round number for minimum deterrence based on the types and yields of warheads that are currently deployed by both sides, the US and Russia. Minimum deterrence goes along with a no first use policy. It's essentially retaliatory. India and China have both adopted minimum deterrence strategies. It's also incompatible with what's called counterforce. Counterforce is an attack that's designed to, it's a first strike attack designed to destroy the adversary's nuclear weapons. The Air Force sells having all of those missile silos in the Midwest that are absolutely, totally vulnerable as, well, that makes the Russians use up all their nuclear weapons to crater out the Midwest to get rid of all our missile silos. I mean, if that's not inane, I don't know what is. But the problem is counterforce only works as a first strike option, and that option puts great pressure on the vulnerable nuclear weapons, and now I'm talking about the ICBMs, to be launched. It's use them or lose them. So one of the things that I would do if I was king is get rid of the ICBMs very early in the disarmament process. The other piece is that we've got a lot of multilateral security commitments. The United States provides a nuclear umbrella for all the NATO countries, as well as our Pacific allies, Australia, South Korea, and Japan, and others. If we have a minimum deterrent, we cannot credibly protect other countries, which provides motivation for those countries, NATO and the Pacific allies, to join the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. A new treaty, it's only been out a couple of years, but it's going to be the last nuclear weapons treaty. So there's lots of formulas for reducing deployed weapons to achieve minimum deterrent. You heard my attitude on ICBMs. The Air Force disagrees, but it doesn't matter. The idea is that this minimum deterrent level is transitional to total disarmament. Now, if you look at what goes away to achieve a minimum deterrent, it should be apparent that the new replacement strategic systems funding has to be terminated. You got to cancel the Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine that replaces Trident. You got to cancel the ground-based strategic deterrent that replaces Minuteman, and you got to cancel the B-21 bomber program that replaces the B-2 and B-52 bombers. Gee, imagine that when you're talking about social and economic justice. And also imagine the strength. If you want a war, the war is going to be with the arms industry, because they will do whatever it takes to protect those programs. So I said earlier, New START does not apply to non-deployed warheads. The next iteration of New START needs to. I talked a little earlier about what might happen if New START had been allowed to expire in 2021. Look at that strategic reserve number for the US, 1,840 weapons. Here's what would have happened within weeks following the expiration of this treaty. There are over 1,000 W-76 Trident warheads that are split up between Kings Bay and Bangor Trident bases. 1,000 warheads that are currently in a bunker or bunkers at both bases. Each Trident II missile can accommodate 8 warheads. Today, there are 4 to 5 warheads per missile, and that is required by the New START Treaty. Those 1,000 warheads could be uploaded onto the Trident II missiles in a couple of weeks. It's that easy. Similarly, there are 400 W-78 warheads that are stored at Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming. Turns out that the Minuteman III missiles, of which we have 200, each has 1 warhead. That's a requirement of New START. New START goes away. Oh, those missiles can carry 3 warheads each. 400 weapons go on to 200 missiles, and now all of those warheads are deployed and ready to launch. And then we've got a few hundred bomber weapons, both gravity bombs and cruise missile nuclear projectiles that could be uploaded onto the bombers. So that entire strategic reserve is designed to be used in lieu of New START. That should scare you. So those strategic reserve weapons that we should negotiate away, and the tactical nuclear weapons that the Russians should negotiate away, should be an essential part of the next START. Because as long as those warheads remain available, they're going to be deployed whenever tensions rise to a level where the government is willing to do that. I don't know if this is true, but I was told, maybe Mona knows, she has her spies. When the Ukraine war started, every submarine, every ballistic missile submarine based in Bangor went to sea. I was told that. I don't know that for a fact. I don't get to go down to the waterfront anymore. But all of the weapons deployed from Bangor were at sea. And after a few months, one of the Trident ballistic missile submarines that had been at sea all of that time and before came in and actually did an at-sea crew change up in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. They took the crew, as you know, the Trident submarines have two crews. They took the crew of a submarine by boat up into the Strait of Juan de Fuca and actually did a crew change at sea without the ship coming into port at all. So, and that was a demonstration. They didn't have to do that. That was a demonstration meant for the Russians to say, hey, we don't ever have to come back to Bangor. So part of my proposition is to limit the reserve warheads to a minimum level that allows for normal maintenance and rotation of the submarines and bombers. And that number, this is just my number, is about 150 warheads in reserve on each side. So that's what it looks like. If you go back to my original slide that had thousands of warheads in the US and Russia. Now we're down to 650 each for US and Russia, and about 1,300 total for the other 7 nuclear weapon states. You recognize that this will take years to achieve, but this is the level where we can expect the other 7 nuclear weapon states to be willing to negotiate the final elimination of nuclear weapons. What's left in the U.S. stockpile? Again, this is Roger's plan. No ICBMs, 20 B-2 bombers with 2 warheads each, and 8 Trident ballistic missile submarines with 16 missiles. Right now they have 20, and 72 warheads each, which is 4 to 5 warheads per missile for 16 missiles. And then 2 of those 8 Trident ballistic missile submarines in maintenance at any given time, 1 on each coast. And that takes that's where the reserve warheads come in, because the missiles and warheads are removed from the submarines when they're in maintenance, and similarly the warheads are removed from bombers when they're in maintenance. So the number complies with the minimum deterrent limit of 500 deployed and 150 reserve warheads. This is more to New START than just warheads and launchers. The most important part of New START is the inspection and verification protocols. So that the additional provisions has to continue those on-site inspections and agreements and notifications, and also provide for on-site verification and overhead verification of warhead and launcher decommissioning. The third bullet here is really important. The pit is the heart of a nuclear weapon. It's the primary of a thermonuclear weapon, and it's vital that those pits are physically destroyed to prevent use in rearming in building new nuclear weapons. If you have a pit, you can build a bomb. So currently there are over 15,000 pits stored at the Pantex site in Texas. There was a project to convert the plutonium pits to a mixed oxide fuel for use in commercial reactors. Burn them up. Cost $8 billion. They did not burn up one pit. The facility was never completed. It was in South Carolina, the Savannah River site. It was terminated in 2018. And right now, the Department of Energy is funded to produce new pits, some number per year, so that we have enough pits to last forever. There are some folks who think, even scientists who think that after about 100 years, a pit will decay such that it can't be detonated. I really hope we don't have to test that. So we should call on the U.S. to terminate new pit production and commit to destroying all the old pits in storage, as well as the pits that are removed from the active warheads as they're dismantled. And then the last bullet is because China is in the midst of a nuclear weapons expansion, even though it's modest, it's incumbent on the Biden administration to negotiate with China to stem its plans for further expansion during the time that the US and Russia are reducing. Which gets us to the final phase. We're getting there, folks. Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty requires all the nuclear weapons states to disarm. And we'll talk about the NPT in a few minutes. So getting down to the minimum deterrent with US and Russia opens the door for negotiations among all 9 nuclear weapon states. And Article 6 says that the nuclear armed states will pursue in good faith and bring to a conclusion negotiations leading to nuclear weapons disarmament in all its aspects under strict and effective international control. That was written 52 years ago. If we had done what we said we were going to do in 1970, there wouldn't be any nuclear weapons in the world today, and we'd have other problems to solve. There is a 5-year review process on the NPT. The last one ended in August, no consensus on a final statement. It was basically the US and Russia bickering over what was going on in Ukraine for the entire meeting, which took place at the UN. However, despite the lack of progress, the framework is there. And I'm convinced more than ever that if we can renegotiate New START in order to create that level playing field between the US, Russia, and the other 7 nuclear weapon states, then it can happen. If it doesn't happen, and there is no political will among the great powers to make it happen, then multilateral negotiations are destined to fail. There's 4 countries that are not parties to the 4 nuclear armed states that are not parties to the NPT: India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. In my mind, if you say, well, how do we get them to negotiate? There's 2 ways. First of all, India and Pakistan would love to not have nuclear weapons. If they could be convinced that they would reciprocally, is that a word? They would at the same time disarm because they're expensive and they're poor countries. I think that if I was the king of the world, I would put China in charge of disarming North Korea and I would put the US in charge of disarming Israel and bring them into the treaty and bring them into the negotiations and make it all happen. The other nuclear weapon states, the UK and France and China, of course, would have to go along with the US and Russia in the multilateral negotiations. And now we finally come to the current treaty, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. It was signed in 2021. It's 2 years old. It's been ratified by 68 nations, but not signed by any of the nuclear weapon states and not signed by any of the nuclear allies, NATO and the Pacific allies. That treaty was negotiated to give voice to the majority of countries that are largely disenfranchised by the global nuclear order. But until the 9 nuclear weapon states agree to disarm, it's going to be incomplete. That doesn't diminish its importance. I really believe that it will emerge as the final unifying document at the end of the nuclear age. And the most important part of the TPNW is verification. Even Ronald Reagan had that one right. If you're going to enter into a negotiation, you need to have a verification. It's key to nuclear disarmament. We know that cooperative verifications do work. The US and Russia have had verifications in place for many years using many treaties, and they work. And those similar safeguards and inspections under the control of the United Nations can and will ensure compliance if and only if the great powers commit to permanent funding of the inspection and verification protocols with the IAEA. So that's it, folks. It's that simple. Peace is possible. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that concludes us. Thanks for putting up with this for an hour and a half or so. And I really appreciate this. It'll be on our website and on our Facebook page.
It's been an honor and a privilege to speak with each of you. I really enjoy doing this. And, I suffered from grumpy old man disease, but it's something we all have to go through.